Hello everybody, good evening and welcome to the United Stand. This is your latest Manchester United news as Marcus Rashford sends a harsh truth message to Ruben Amorim. Aston Villa send an even bigger one to Manchester United. And I also have to make an apology, which I'm happy to do, but not happy in these circumstances. Lots to get into on the show tonight, and as always, get your thoughts in. So look, we've seen Aston Villa, we've seen Marcus Rashford, and we've seen a very big message sent from Marcus Rashford. Even that very first incident where the ball goes up in the air and he absolutely pile drives into the centre-back, like many said on social media, he hasn't done in a Manchester United shirt for 18 months. But I think this just... look, this sends a very predictable message, and it sends a very obvious message, and it amplifies just how hard the job Amorim is. I always said about Marcus Rashford under Eric Ten Hag, Jadon Sancho under Eric Ten Hag, the best outcome for Manchester United was they got their head down and produced the goods in a Man United shirt, because then you don't have to move them on. You're already paying them the wages. There's no replacement fee. There's no loss on them and their wages. If they do the job we pay them to do, everybody's happy. But if they don't do that job and you have to move them on, it is always going to cause you a problem, because Player FC will be like, I want him to cook there. But also, they're going to be motivated to prove that particular manager wrong. And look, Sancho, for the first few weeks at Chelsea, looked like he was going to do. They'd now like to send him back. Marcus Rashford today, did he play particularly well? I'll leave that down to you. But what we did see, without a shadow of a doubt, was effort that we haven't seen in a Manchester United shirt. Not my words, the words of Ruben Amorim. And I think it's a harsh truth. And it's a harsh truth as to how hard this job is. I look at that Aston Villa side, I think there's a bigger message tonight. But I also look at Rashford and I go, did he play particularly well? No. Did he put more effort in that first 10 minutes than he has for most of the season? Yes. And for Ruben Amorim, if he wasn't watching that game, he would be sat there, if he did, going, if he'd have just done that in training, he'd be a Man United player. And that's what you're going to have in life. And it's really difficult because distraction tactics, as we were talking about this morning, some people don't want to have the harsh truth that Ruben Amorim has made a decision on some players, and those players are going to be out to get him now. They're not motivated in a United shirt. Amorim removes them and they're motivated. So the question is, why couldn't you motivate yourself? Why do you need to be kicked out to motivate yourself? And it must be very, very frustrating for Amorim. It's certainly frustrating for us to see players like Anthony scored yesterday. Marcus Rashford might start scoring goals and playing well for Villa because they're motivated. And the question is, could we have got them motivated here? Were they given the opportunities? And I think certainly they were. So the message is that, look, this is the enormity of the problem that Ruben Amorim faces. He's gone into that football club. He's seen players that don't match his vision. He removes them, and then they potentially are going to start being motivated. But that's life. It's life. I'm not surprised we're talking about this at the start of this show. I'm not surprised that we saw Rashford really putting it in for 10 minutes. I know he only played 20, and I'm sure he will keep doing that because it's a motivation. I understand Rashford's motivation. He wants to prove everybody wrong. He wants to show everybody that he's still a good player. The question is why we couldn't get that motivation in a Man United training ground at Carrington. And the answer is I don't know. But I still think Amorim's made the right choice, even if it is going to bite him on the back. I still think he has. The issue is, when Amorim removes these players, is he going to get new players in? And I look at that Aston Villa side today, and taking it away from Anthony and Rashford for a moment, look at Aston Villa today. I mean, look, do you want my honest opinion on Rashford? For 5-10 minutes, he put a lot of effort in. He looked ridiculously not sharp because he hasn't played for 6 weeks, because he didn't get a move at the start of January. He didn't look match sharp at all. I think in that one-on-one he had, I would have expected him to get a shot off, but he's just not match sharp yet, and that's going to take time. I thought Malen looked fantastic. I thought the Garcia-like guy they brought in looked good. I thought Asensio looked very good when he came on. And they've still got Disasi as well. I'm more interested in, I mean, I couldn't give a toss about the Rashford Amorim thing. At the end of the day, the decision's been made. I back the manager. I hope Rashford does well, and I hope we get a fee in the summer. Everything else is just noise. If Rashford starts scoring goals, is he going to come back under Amorim? Of course he's not. He'll get sold. That's very business-like, but for me, that's all that matters. But the bigger argument I would have again is you've got Aston Villa, who are currently 6 points off 4th place. They're in the Champions League. They're probably not going to win it. They're probably not going to get in the top 4. If you're in the Champions League, that's £80 million. Aston Villa are ambitious. They want to be back in the Champions League. It's going to be a top 5 this year. What do they do in January? Do they sit back like Man United and go, we can't afford it, we're not ambitious? Or do you go, let's get out there, let's go aggressive, let's compete, let's get some players in, let's rejuvenate our season. We're still only halfway this season. Why start thinking about next season? They bring in Garcia, they bring in Rashford, they bring in Asensio, they bring in Disasi, they bring in Malen. They brought 5 players in. And watching Villa today, I know Spurs are crap. I mean, I shouldn't say that too soon because we're playing them in a week. But they just look like a different side. Ollie Watkins is injured. Malen, I thought, looked brilliant in the build-up play, creative. Ramsey, Tielemans, they've got a lot of injuries there. But they look like a team that they're giving themselves a chance to boost themselves in the second half of the season and potentially get themselves into the top 5. And I just sat there watching it before Rashford came on. I'm sat watching the game and I'm going, I know it's only early days, but those bits of business have boosted that team. They've energised that team. They've freshened things up. And the fans are reacting to that. And Villa can probably look forward to quite a good end to the season now. I mean, they could win the FA Cup. I'd say they've got a better chance of winning the FA Cup than us. And they've certainly got a better chance of getting in the top 5 than us. And I look at Villa and I go, you know what? I mean, I'm not going to stand up and go that far, but I almost want to applaud it and go, well done, Aston Villa, for having owners that actually prioritise on-the-field success. What a lovely feeling that must be. Instead of talking about PSR, FFP, rejuvenation of the area, future projects, Mission 21, it literally is what's in front of us today. Let's deal with it today. Let's be ambitious. And that's the bigger message to me. I don't know whether Amorim would have watched the game today because of the Rashford issue, but if he was watching that game, I don't think he'd have spent a lot of time thinking about Rashford. I think he'd have spent more time looking at the club that Villa are and going, why are Aston Villa bringing players in January, halfway through a race, to help them finish the race? And why am I just getting Dorgu and 3 players out the door? It's confusing. It's very confusing. And ultimately, it comes down to we're still being run like a business and not a football club. We've got to speculate to accumulate, and we're not doing that. So we're stuck with a situation where Emery's got 5 new players, and Ruben Amorim has got 1, and he's lost 3. And this is his first transfer window. So, look, Villa are on a different level to us. Hopefully, we'll avoid them in the FA Cup because I think they'd beat us quite comfortably at the moment. But that's the bigger message to me. And it's a harsh truth, isn't it? Everywhere you look at the moment, there is this harsh truth that it's hard to find positivity around Manchester United and Amorim's job specifically at the moment. It's difficult. He's almost on thin ice everywhere he looks. He's not had the reinforcements. He's not had the support. And he's taken risks on removing players who could use that as a motivator to make him look silly. So I do feel bad for Amorim. I do, because when you remove Rashford and you don't replace him, and that's the harsh thing, isn't it? The replacement for Rashford was Tell. Now, he was playing up front for Spurs today with you know, living off thin air, scraps. Still got a very good goal out of nothing. If Amorim removes Rashford and brings Tell in, at least he can focus on Tell. He's removed Rashford and Anthony and brought nothing in. It's a precarious position, isn't it? Because it only takes Rashford or Anthony to do well, and people would say, well, you'd have been better off keeping them because you didn't replace them anyway. So he's sort of out on a limb, isn't he? Because of that lack of support. And, you know, you go back to Aston Villa, John Duran to Saudi is a lot of money for the club, but they've invested it very, very quickly by bringing players in. some of them on loan, and that's the ambition of their ownership, whereas ours doesn't have that. David said, I didn't see him send any message, to be honest. He was below average today, and of course he will score a lot of goals at Villa because they create a lot as well, says David. I sort of agree with you, David. I mean, look, as I said, if Marcus Rashford does... I mean, look, the first problem Rashford's got is getting into that team. Mallon looked very good today. Jacob Ramsey's playing really well at the moment. Morgan Rogers is in that team. Leon Bailey. Ollie Watkins is coming back. Asensio. He's got to find a way to start for Aston Villa first. That's not set in stone. And but I think it's important as well that we don't want Rashford to fail. I want him to do well. I want him to do well, but I also want to set the scene in a sense that if he does do well, it doesn't make Ruben Amorim wrong. That's the huge message is Rashford's now going to put the effort in. He wasn't doing that. I'm not speculating here. Ruben Amorim, as recently as last Thursday, said Rashford doesn't train the way I expect him to train. He is going to put the effort in now. And as a manager of Man United, Erik ten Hag saw this with Jadon Sancho. It's a harsh truth that you're pulling your hair out trying to get these players to do what you want them to do. They don't do it, so you move them on. But pound to a penny of shit, they're suddenly going to be motivated because, look, you turn up to training at Man United, you live in the high life. You live in the dream. You're earning fantastic money. Why do you need to work hard? Suddenly, somebody says, you're not very good, get out of my club. Hey, up! Ah, right. Now we're motivated. And that's the harsh truth, isn't it? That's the message. Nobody can tell me that Marcus Rashford played well today, but nobody can tell me that we've ever seen that from Rashford this season. Like the first long ball, he out jumps and bullies a centre-back for Spurs. We've not seen that in a Man United shirt. So nobody can tell me he's not motivated and he hasn't got a point to prove. And nobody can criticise that because I would expect and want that. My point is, Amorim's sort of in a vulnerable position, isn't he? Because he's made that decision because he has to, but he's not been given a replacement, and Rashford is in the Premier League. I mean, I don't know whether you saw the game today, and we're all used to it as Man United fans, but he wasn't even starting for Aston Villa, and I'd say in the first 5 minutes of the BBC coverage, they had about 2 minutes on Rashford. So he's there in front of Amorim all the time. And Amorim will want him to do well so he can get the money. But if he does well, the pressure comes onto Amorim for getting rid of him. It's a harsh situation. But that's the reality of the job. It may well be an impossible job. It may well be certainly a difficult job. But what choice does he have? He has a star player. Well, he has 2 star players that aren't performing. One of them to the extent that he doesn't even want him on the bench. At least Casemiro's on the bench. So he removes him. And then you end up with, we shouldn't have done it. What do you think of Spurs? And if they sack Ange, will they get a bounce on Sunday? After a week of training, will we get a decent performance from us, says Dan. I think Spurs against Man United next week is really interesting because, I mean, God knows if they're going to sack him. I see a lot of parallels there. I mean, we should be really happy that we're still in the FA Cup, I suppose, because I looked at Spurs today and I was like, right, they can't win the Carabao Cup now. They're out. They can't win the FA Cup now. They're out. They're pretty much where we are in the league. They're not going to get a European spot. They absolutely desperately need European football for money. So their only shot is the Europa League. Well, welcome to the club. But we still have the FA Cup. And I'm not saying we're going to win the FA Cup, but Chelsea are gone. Spurs are gone. Arsenal are gone. Liverpool are gone. So you're sort of looking at it now. Newcastle, teams that are better than us in the tournament. Well, Bournemouth, yeah. Newcastle, yeah. Man City, yeah. Aston Villa, yeah. But the draw could be kind. And we could get... I'm still hoping we're going to get better. But, yeah, I think looking at Spurs, they look like Man United. They don't create many chances. They take too many touches on the ball. There's no fluidity. There's no confidence. It'll be an interesting game next week. And will they have Ange still or will they not have Ange still? And if they don't have Ange, they'll probably get a new manager bounce, of course. But I think our biggest moments in the next month are going to be who we get in the Europa League and who we get tomorrow night, because I think we're a cup team again this year. It's incredible, actually. I was thinking about this the other day. It's absolutely incredible how last season was a living nightmare at this point. From a footballing point of view, it was a nightmare. Injuries, we were absolutely terrible. Ten Hag was under pressure. And the FA Cup became this minor miracle that could get us into Europe and earn us some money and save Ten Hag his job. And we did do it, but the season was horrific. Here we are a year later, it's worse. We're actually in a worse situation than we were last year in the sense of where we are in the league and the performances that we're putting in. And we do need that miracle again. So I don't think Spurs next week actually really matters. I mean, it always matters in the sense that you don't want to lose, but it's not a cup game. It's all about the cup for us. As long as the Glazers are involved, Man United will never recover, says It's Koos. They are poison that have rotted the club from the inside out. Amorim is looking sus, maybe overhyped, says Sulai. And Alex Zed says, this falls on the Glazers for not letting managers stay long enough to establish a culture and a standard. It doesn't matter if we back Amorim if the owners don't make it clear he's in charge now, says Alex. Well, I think, there is always the traffic light system. There is gold. Sorry, there is no gold. There is green positivity and there is red negativity. And a lot of people live their life between the two. I think amber is where you find balance in life. Some things are good, some things are bad. Now, would I describe the situation for Manchester United under our ownership as amber? I would probably say it's red. It's a warning. The club has got the brakes on. But there are elements of things that are not completely horrific. I do think that when you look at the Rashford conversation or the Antony conversation, Ruben Amorim has been able to do things that I don't think were possible. You go back to Solskjaer saying on the weekend before a game, Rashford should focus on football and less on off-field activities. And at his next press conference, unprompted, he's apologising. That shows you what player power was there. You've now got a manager who's openly saying that this guy's lazy in training. That never would have happened 2 years ago. It never would have happened 4 years ago. And it never would have happened 7 years ago. So we can all be negative about the way the club is being run. But there are elements of that football club that have changed a little bit for the better. I think Amorim has been backed on certain topics. But it has to be consistent and it has to be better. My point is, there's no point in half baking a cake. There's no point in getting some ingredients and then not getting the others. And what's the point in Ruben Amorim being backed to remove players like Casemiro and Rashford from the first team, even though they're on ridiculous money, but then you don't replace them for him? You're almost setting him up to fail. And I think that's fundamentally what that comment's all about, isn't it? There are elements of things that you could say, well, that's new, but they haven't followed through on it because I think they are chances. I don't think they actually know what they're doing. What should have happened in the January transfer window is Marcus Rashford should have been removed and an exciting replacement should have been brought in, even if it was Tell for 4 months or somebody else. What we ended up doing was the big statement of removing Rashford, not replacing him, but also loaning him to a club that's better than us in the league that we're at, so he can play in a team that's better than ours and probably perform now he's motivated. When you break it down, that is a shit deal that exposes Amorim massively to risk because, yes, he wants to remove that player and it is a sacrificial lamb, but we didn't replace that player, so Amorim hasn't got an alternative to go, well, I'd rather have this alternative. And also, we loaned him to a Premier League club that's better than us, who may have a better season than us, and that makes Rashford look better than us. So, we sort of start down the right path and then we mess it up. And that exposes the manager because he is being backed, but not backed fully. And that you have to do that. While I agree with the pressure notion, isn't it blatantly obvious that Rashford doesn't try in the United kit? I want him to do well so we can get rid, says Swami. Yes, I do. I know. I agree with you on that, Swami, but that's not the story the media will paint, is it? Rashford scores a couple of goals against Ipswich. Man United lose to Spurs. The headlines get written, don't they? It's all right if all United fans feel like you do and I do, but we know that's not the world, and then it just becomes pressure for Amorim. What do you think of Spurs and if they sack out? We've done that one, thank you very much. Mark, don't you think Man United managers suffer from too much scrutiny? I mean, do you remember Klopp's first season? He had some terrible losses, says Chazelle. But that's Manchester United. That's Manchester United. I mean, we've had people say that, Manchester United fans put too much pressure on their players and therefore it's Manchester United fans' fault that Man United fail. And I'm like, I mean, is this new idiocy, or is it just people who lack knowledge of Manchester United? There'll be people who are older than me in the chat who've been at Man United in the 70s and the 80s. I can certainly tell you in the 90s and the noughties when I used to go, there was pressure on Ryan Giggs, there was pressure on Roy Keane, there was pressure on Wayne Rooney. I mean, I've told this story so many times because it's one that the younger fans probably won't accept or believe, but some of the people around my age and older, or who were at those games at that time, you'd regularly go and watch Man United in the early noughties, and Ryan Giggs would not be being booed, but there'd be groans because he runs into another person and loses the ball, or he puts another cross in that's crap. That used to happen. The moaning at Old Trafford has always been there. There are high standards at that football club. Now, Ryan Giggs is a legend, but that's just the pressure of playing for Man United. And Ryan Giggs was very regularly like that. I mean, you can watch the highlights and think he was amazing, and he was. But in a game, Ryan Giggs running down the wing, if you used to watch him in 90 minutes, he'd put 3 crap crosses in before he put a worldie in. He'd take people on 4 times and lose the ball twice. And people would start to go, oh, God, he's having one of those games again. And it'd be like, it wasn't, under Sir Alex at Old Trafford, it wasn't all bloody clapping and cheering all the time. The standards were still set. If anything, the standards were even higher. It's not a new phenomenon that Man United players are under pressure. That's why they say that's not a Man United player. Roy Keane, Paul Ince, Gary Neville, David Beckham, Eric Cantona, immense pressure. Immense pressure. This is absolute bullshit that Man United fans sink Manchester United players. I think where we do sink players is a lack of patience. We make our mind up about players too quickly, but demanding better from people like Bruno Fernandes, who's been here for years, or a Luke Shaw or a Harry Maguire, they know that comes as part of the territory of being a Man United player. It came as part of the... you think about someone like Gary Neville at the end, and he was under immense pressure. Oh, he's not the player he used to be. It's time to hang up your boots. You saw it with Rooney as well. It's a laughable... I mean, it's what we were talking about this morning. It's those types of arguments that keep the Glazers in power. Because instead of focusing on the main issue at Manchester United, people like to take you down distraction ways and go, well, actually, it's the fans that are causing this. They put too much pressure on their players. That's why they don't do very well. No, it's not. It's because we've spent a lot of money on crap players who aren't good enough to wear the shirt and therefore can't deal with the pressure of being a Man United shirt because they're not good enough in the first place. That's the fact. I've been watching Man United since 1985 and the amount of pressure nowadays is incomparable. Why did Klopp not experience the same, says Chazelle? Well, it's not incomparable, mate. And I don't believe your comment. And I don't know why you're talking about Klopp, because you don't portray an actual understanding of football. Liverpool managers have been under pressure. Did you not see how Roy Hodgson was treated? Did you not see how it was with Houllier? Liverpool fans are no different to Manchester United fans. They demand a certain standard. There's no difference. There's a media difference between Liverpool and Manchester United, but that's not fans. Fans of Liverpool and Manchester United set high standards because that's the football club and that's the way it works. And as for saying you've been a fan of Manchester United since 1985 and it's different, well, where the fuck were you in the late 80s, mate? I mean, because I'm presuming you were on a long holiday in 89 and 90 when people were saying, sack Sir Alex, it's time to go, and there was massive pressure on him in the media and in the fan base. It's preposterous to think that in 2025, Man United players and managers have just suddenly been put under pressure by the fans. We've always done it. We've always done it. And the media, well, the media is something very different, mate. The media is something that love the cycle of Manchester United. They love a new manager to build them up and knock them down. And the cycle works really well because they can predict how it's going to work and how they're going to benefit from that. They don't want us to do well, really. They just want the cycle to continue. Man United's become a retirement home and an injury clinic, says Alan. And I missed earlier was putting my Kane posters up, says Robert McCormack. We wondered where you were this morning. Andre Gomez says, I like Amorim, but I swear to God, if I see Delo on the left next game, I'm just not watching. We're absolutely desperate for a left wing back and it needs calling out. No reason to sign him otherwise, says Andre. And Dylan says, off topic, Mark, but when's Amorim's contract is up with United? Do you think he will sign another one? If he doesn't, who do you go for and why? I mean, that's a scary question, mate. It really is. Because, as we all know, Amorim's contract's up in 2 years, which means at the end of next season, a decision will be need to made because nobody goes into their final year. And that means he's got one transfer window. I mean, I haven't said this for a few weeks, but it's true. Ruben Amorim's got one transfer window for Man United to make a decision on him. It's incredible. Because they didn't do anything in January. They probably won't do anything next January. So he's got this summer transfer window, and next summer they've got to make a decision whether they're keeping him or not because he'll only have a year left on his contract. I mean, it's incredible, really, isn't it? So it's all everywhere you look, and I think everybody agrees with this, is that from Amorim's contract point of view, this summer has to be amazing. Look, this summer's going to make or break us, to be honest with you. We're either going to start to close the gap, or we're going to fall behind spectacularly, and we're already behind. And if we're not in Europe, that's going to make it even harder. But this summer transfer window is absolutely make or break. It really is. It has to be spot on. It has to be in volume, and it has to be successful. Because if it goes wrong, there may be no way back. Robert McCormack says McTominay, I'm presuming he's scored. Let's not be delusional. Carrington isn't a healthy place. Why are players constantly underperforming for the club? Look at how we play, and you'll all. I don't know what that meant. I don't know what that's meant to mean, Rack. You need to communicate your point better because I can't understand what that means. So, Carrington's a toxic place, and we all target players. So we're going back to that again, are we? It's the fans' fault that multimillionaire footballers are playing badly. Yeah, I don't think that washes really, mate. Oliver Barnaby says, thing is, we was all excited about Amorim. Ineos doing the hip thing. I think he was going to be back on January. How silly of us. Same old United, says Oliver. And Darker says, I don't think Glazers would dare get rid of Amorim, but they wouldn't hold back and sell the likes of Garnacho and Cobby and make 1 or 2 good signings to make the fans happy. I fear the summer, says Darker. Look, this fan base will always be manipulated by signings, and I'm part of that fan base. I'm not manipulated by signings, but ultimately, what we think individually doesn't matter because the fan base is a movement. And there is no movement to remove the Glazers because it always gets manipulated by shiny toys. And it's been going on for years and years and years. So, yeah, a couple of signings in the summer, even if they sell Garnacho and Mainu, as long as they bring a couple of players in, people will go, well, maybe this is going to be it. And then it won't be it, and nobody will do anything about it. And I think we all know that that's happened in the past, certainly. Look, I'll repeat it. I don't really know what the context of this is, but I'm against... I mean, I know what the context is. So in a couple of weeks, Man United played Goodison Park away for the last time, Everton. And I was talking about this on the watch-along for Villa Spurs. And I said, be very, very sad because when I think about getting first into football in the late 80s, Goodison Park was always my favourite ground as a kid, as an away ground. And it's always been there. And now it's gone. Or going, that just feels like the end of a chapter. And I remember when it happened with Highbury and Main Road. And the only ones that really are left are Villa Park, St James's Park, obviously Old Trafford, Anfield. Old Trafford will go next. Our symbol of our football club is going to go in the next few years. I don't agree with that. I think it's disgusting. And I know why it's going to happen because the Glazers have let it rot to a point where it's just not financially viable to repair it. But you go to Anfield and they haven't let it rot. They've maintained it, extended it, and revamped it over the years. Liverpool will never leave Anfield. They will never leave Anfield. It will always be their home. Liverpool fans wouldn't let them leave Anfield. Man United fans will let Old Trafford get knocked down. And that's the difference. Liverpool wouldn't put up with the Glazers. Man United fans would. I'm not saying that to be antagonistic. I'm not saying that Liverpool are better than Man United. Of course not. But there is a difference between their fan base and our fan base and the things that they would allow and we have allowed. And there's no way Anfield would be left to rot and rust and they wouldn't leave it because it's important to them. Old Trafford's going to get knocked down in front of our eyes in the next few years. It's very sad. And it's symbolic of the things we accept under this ownership, because nobody will actually do anything about it. Nobody will actually come together and just go, no matter what, we see this through to the end now. No signings are going to make any difference. No shiny new toys. We follow this through to the end. But we won't follow it through to the end, because even if everybody got together now, they bought Gyökeres in the summer, 20% of this fan base would stop straight away and go, well, let's just wait and see what happens. And that's the end of it. In the minority, but I think bringing Amorim in November is a positive. Gets to study the league before spending big, unlike Ten Hag, says Aaron. Hypothetically, this is a great point, Aaron, but we did this, Anon, we spoke about this last night, though. Giving a manager 7 months with no pressure to analyse a squad, if you're backing him, is great. But that feeds into the naivety of Ineos again. They think Man United's a long project. They think that we can just sit back and enjoy it and work and assess it. Every day, you're under pressure. Every day, you're being scrutinised. Every game, you have to win. Ruben Amorim is never going to be in the position where he can just lose for the next 4 months and not be in Europe, and everyone's going to go, it's okay. It's not going to be okay, because you have to get results from day one in football, not just at Manchester United. So, look, maybe that was Ineos's plan. Now or never, don't worry, no matter what happens, we will back you. But it's a naivety of what Man United is and what football is. You can't bring a manager in and say, we're writing off the next 7 months, don't worry about it, and we're not doing anything in January because we're going to do it in the summer. We're basically writing it off. But then you're bumping up ticket prices. So you're writing 7 months off, it doesn't matter, but then you're charging fans the privilege of watching that write-off. It's just messed up, isn't it? It's messed up strategy. And I think that's what many people feel. Shezil says, I mentioned Klopp because he came in mid-season as well with a new style of play like Amorim. I think as fans we can be more supportive. I don't think there's a problem with the fans, mate. I mean, I think it's a fair point. I don't think there is a problem with the fans supporting Amorim. I really don't. But as you've said, and as I've agreed with, this is Manchester United, and the scrutiny on Manchester United will always be bigger than any other club in England. It's just the way it is. Even Liverpool fans would admit that. The training ground is badly affected, not the fans, says Rack. Well, look, Rack, it's it might not be well known to you, but it's certainly well known to me and a few others that whilst you're unhappy and I'm unhappy, there are people who work for Manchester United who each month get a pay slip from Manchester United who don't have job security and don't have job satisfaction. People who work at Man United are not happy. It's a fact. People at Man United are not happy. That could be people in the media department, that could be people in the fitness department, that could be people in the admin department, that could be people in the commercial department, that could be people at Carrington. But it is not a happy workplace because everybody is working under a very... I mean, look, if you go to work tomorrow and your boss every day is saying, your job could be under scrutiny, we can't give you any certainty, we're making cuts all the time, we're going to keep making cuts, and your job might not be safe. You're not going to go to work rejuvenated, excited, and ambitious, are you? Because you're going to go, well, things might get better in the next 2 years, but I might not be better here to see it. So you're not wrong about Carrington. You're not wrong about the club in general. There is a lot of scared, demotivated, isolated people working at Manchester United because they don't feel part of it. They don't. Mr. Arnold says United owners aren't bothered about winning titles. Why would the players be? City are where they are because their owners are hungry for success. I don't think it's just Manchester United and City. I think it's a great point, Mr. Arnold. This is why I mentioned Villa at the start. Aston Villa, Newcastle have owners that are desperate to put money into that football club, but they are limited by FFP. Aston Villa are rich. Newcastle are very rich. They can't get the money in because their revenue doesn't match the money they have personally to pump in. So they have to go down this route of we need to be in Europe because that's 80 million of revenue, which makes our revenue go up, which allows us to get money into the club. They have to, they're not like Man United. Man United are going to make massive revenue every single year because we're Manchester United. Aston Villa and Newcastle don't have that type of fan base, etc. That type of revenue. So they want to get the money in, but it's going to take them time to get the money in. Man United, we could get the money in, but we've got owners that don't want to put the money in. So what you've got is that if you've got an owner that wants to be successful and wants to invest in that success, you're going to be successful more likely than the owner that doesn't want to do that. They want to make money off your club. And that is what Man United is. Our ownership model for 20 years has been, I want to make money off this football club. Clubs that want to put money into their club and be successful, they're going to be better than us. And that's what Aston Villa have shown in the January transfer window. They've shown business acumen, yes. The deal for Duran was fantastic. But they've spent that Duran money. Look, Duran's an interesting player. But would you rather have Duran as a striker, or would you rather bring in 2 defenders, 2 forwards, an attacking midfielder? Ambitious, yes. In the hybrid to Emirates, not too much sentiment. So, says Alan. What's that? Alan, these statements of whatever you're making, I can't answer them. I don't know what your point is. Is there any word of a new sporting director, says United Nick? I don't think we'll get one. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate all your work. Thank you, Chazelle, for your comments tonight. And Kia says, if Ineos were any good at football, they'd have shown it at Nice. We're still at the mercy of the Glazers, miracles and individual performances. Thank you very much for that. I'm just catching up on some of these comments. Also, just why I remember this, I do need to make an apology here. Now, I've been doing quite a lot of live content over the weekend. And when I'm doing a watch along on That's Football, it's quite laid back and you sort of have conversations about what film you're watching, what food you're eating, whilst you're watching a game. That reminds me, 11 o'clock tonight, That's Football, Super Bowl. If you've never watched our Super Bowl watch along before, it's always a great laugh. American sweets, drinks, fun. I'll talk you through how it works. One of the biggest sporting events of the year. Very niche, but it's growing every year. We'd love you to join us. Anyway, I was doing a watch along yesterday and somebody said, you've had a horrible 48 hours, absolute pelters you're getting on social media. How do you put up with it? And I said, I don't read. I post. I don't read. I read the chat on live on YouTube. I can't see anything on there. So this morning, I had 20 minutes free. I go on to X. I do a bit of searching and I find a load of abuse. Some of it quite harsh. Some of it physically threatening me again. And I'm like, what's the origins of this? So I look into it, and in 2 minutes into the second half against Leicester on Friday night, a tweet goes out from the United Stand Twitter account, Yoro can't even make a 5-yard pass. Those people who are waiting to jump on any mistake from us to have a pop at us instantly screenshot it. And my name gets attached. This guy is this guy needs this, he needs beating up, this, that, and the other. I haven't been on the United Stand Twitter account, running it, for about 9 years. I don't post on there. So that wasn't me, for a start. I like Lenny Yoro. I think he's going to be a fantastic player. So that's not me, for a start. Secondly, I wasn't aware about this until today when I decided to find out why people keep messaging me about all these threats I'm getting, because I've not received any directly and I don't go searching on social media for it. It's not good for your mental health. However, that was posted on the United Stand Twitter account and it's bang out of order. That is not what that account is for. And people have been told that today. As somebody who is a massive part of the United Stand, I don't agree that the United Stand Twitter account should be passing judgment on a player like that. And if the person who posted that wants to do that, they should have a personal Twitter account to do it and take the heat from the rest of the fan base instead of it being indirected towards me or the United Stand. So I apologise for that, and that has been raised and that has been spoken about. It's not acceptable. It's not acceptable to be doing that about a player that is a new signing and saying he can't even play a 5-yard pass. It's not acceptable. And as part of the United Stand, I apologise for that, and that shouldn't have gone out there. I don't appreciate getting threats directly at me because it's got nothing to do with me and it's not in context with what I do and what I think about that particular player or any of our new signings. But I also have to accept that the United Stand is something that I've built with a lot of other people. And as the main presenter of the United Stand, I would like to apologise for anybody that irritated or frustrated, because I actually do share your frustration about it as well, and irritation. It is not acceptable, and that's not what should be happening on there. And if it happens again, it will be brought up again on the only community that matters, which is you, because you do deserve an explanation and you do deserve an apology for that, and that is not acceptable. If I'd done it on my personal account or someone else does it on their personal account, it's traceable to that person and that opinion. And I've said out there, Maguire's shit in the past, Matic is shit, and I have to own that. But the United Stand Twitter account should not be passing personal judgment on players like that. And certainly when it goes smack against what I have personally said, that young players and new signings shouldn't be being written off in the first year that they're here. But yeah, I did wonder why so many people were saying to me on That's Football, you've had a horrible weekend, people trying to get you cancelled, this, that and the other. And I thought, I was out drunk on Thursday night. I know what I said. It wasn't that bad. But it all starts to add up now. And I'm always going to front up. If we make mistakes, I'll front up. But I do think there are some horrible people out there that just use little things out of context to try and pin it on me or other people, and that's not fair. And what I said today is that if people post personal opinion on the United Stand Twitter account, nobody knows who's posted it. So people are automatically it's gonna taint me, the United Stand, and other people who had nothing to do with it. You know, Beth as a presenter will be damaged by that because she presents on the United Stand and it was on the United Stand Twitter account. So I accept that was bang out of order. In the grand scheme of things, Yoro can't play a 5-yard pass isn't that deep. But on a bigger scheme, it's slating a young player that we shouldn't be doing. Anyway, do you think these players are aware of the history of the club and what it means to play in that red shirt, or is it really collect the wage and bounce, says Oliver? I think in the modern game, this is a great point. And I think it goes back to recruitment and personality. I remember saying a year ago when we were looking at Elise and Neto, I know that Neto is a settled married man, and I didn't know anything about Elise. And again, people took it out of context. And I said, look, Sir Alex Ferguson used to look at this. Sir Alex Ferguson used to push young players to get married and get settled because in his experience, people in settled relationships who aren't out clubbing and everything like that make for better, more consistent footballers. You might disagree with that, but I think that's important. I think happy home life, settled home life, regular bedtime, sensible eating, you know, all these things, professional attitude. So you look at Man City players, Liverpool players, some of their players earn the same as our players, but they're consistently performing every week. We've spoken about this for probably 18 months now. I think Manchester United's recruitment over the last 10 years, personality-wise, has been awful. I mean, look, people will look at people like Di Maria, Jadon Sancho. But what about Alexis Sanchez? You blow Man City out of the water to get him. You make him the best paid player in Premier League history. He comes to Manchester United, and the first day, after the first training session, he's saying to his agent he wants to go back to Arsenal. That's after 24 hours. Now, whether it's a joke or not, where's the background checks on the personality of this player and his desire to play for Manchester United? Or was it literally, forget the background checks, write the biggest check? There is a mercenary is never going to be as useful to you as Scott McTominay. And Scott McTominay's not as good as Alexis Sanchez, but Scott McTominay's Manchester United career shits all over it. Alexis Sanchez, talent-wise, is levels above Scott McTominay, but Scott McTominay's career at Man United is levels above Alexis Sanchez. What does that come down to? Application, personality, desire, professionalism. And this is something that Man United have got very wrong for 10 years because they've looked at talent and spent money on it, but what they haven't done is looked at personality, looked at the background of these players. And that's something that's really, really important that we must do. And hopefully with the likes of Dorgu, I certainly think already from Agate, De Ligt, Mazraoui, Yoro, Xerxes. I mean, we probably don't know enough about whether they're good enough as players, but I think personalities-wise, I mean, I was listening to some interviews with Xerxes the other day, and I think I saw somebody on Twitter actually say, I can't believe he talks like that. Like, if you actually listen to some interviews with Xerxes, he's actually a really nice lad with really interesting, not your typical footballer. He's like a really interesting conversationalist. Comes across as really intelligent, and trust me, in the football world that doesn't always happen. So I think when you look at, I mean, like, I know I sort of glow up the summer better than other people do, but I also think that the personality, I mean, hopefully that's something that's changing, because that will make us better over time. How good it will make us, they still need to be good footballers, but as a bare minimum, you've got to bring the right personalities in. And look, if Dorgu follows the same route as Mazraoui, De Ligt, Yoro, Xerxes and Agate, then this is something we haven't done for the last however many years, and it's so important. Carl Middlecoop has gifted 5 memberships. You're a legend. He says you're a legend as well. Thank you very much, Carl. GK says, I thought we were waiting for Rashford to leave so we could stop talking about him. Now he's a topic. First topic of discussion after a 15-minute cameo. Look, GK, that's not what's been said. Certainly not on this channel. I think Amorim has said it, and I think we'd all like to move on from it. But I also said when he was going to Aston Villa that the Rashford conversation ain't going to stop now. He's playing in the same bloody league as us every week, and it will be a conversation. And look, I'm not going to make that choice, mate. I'm not going to do that, because that goes against everything we stand for. Like, the United Stand is a community for Manchester United fans to talk about what they want to talk about. And if people bring it up, then we will talk about it. I'd like us to move on, but he's a Man United player as well. It would have been better if it had been in Barcelona or Milan, because it would have been more out of sight, out of mind. But it will be scrutinised. And that's why I wanted to mention it at the start of the video, because I just wanted to portray the position Amorim is in and the position he's been put in. He wanted Rashford out because Rashford wasn't putting the work in. I think Rashford now will be out to prove a point against Amorim, and it's almost Amorim versus Rashford. But that's a really harsh position for Amorim to be in, because he would have kept Rashford if Rashford had put the work in. And if Rashford now starts putting the work in to prove Amorim wrong, why didn't he prove Amorim wrong in a Man United shirt? So Amorim could be in a very vulnerable position here, and I'm just saying it shouldn't really be Amorim versus Rashford, because if Rashford does well for Villa, we'll get a good price for him in the summer. And also, again, I would move it away from Amorim and Rashford, and I'd say, look at the ownership. What they should have done, when Amorim said get rid of Rashford, they should have replaced Rashford, and then they should have provided him with other players so that he's not exposed. And he is exposed, because Anthony and Rashford have gone and neither have been replaced. And that's my point. Do you think these players are aware of done that? From Oliver? Great point. Floating Traveller, welcome to the Members Club. Thank you very much. You've been a member for a month already. Thank you. Point was, new stadiums are successful, says Alan. Well, I disagree. That's not your point. Your point is that new stadiums are successful. I mean, we're all over the place today, but it's fantastic. I don't think new stadiums are successful. I prefer Highbury to the Emirates, 100%. Go down to the Emirates, walk around it. It's quiet. It's got no history. Highbury, they had to move out because it was small. It's London, I get it. But give me Highbury every day. I loved Highbury. Absolutely loved it. Was lucky enough to go there a couple of times. Absolutely loved it. Arsenal moved because they needed to, and it makes them more money. You take Liverpool to a 100,000 capacity stadium a mile down the road, it might look better. It isn't better. You've just lost your history. You've just walked away from what your football club's all about. You might want to do that, Alan, but some people don't. And I don't think new is better, because the trouble is, in 10 years' time, the Emirates will be dated. I loved Highbury. How do German clubs establish their ownership model where fans own 51%, or does British laws not allow this ownership model, says HD Villas? I don't know, and I don't think we'll ever get it, mate. I think the Premier League makes too much money, and I think that I certainly don't think we'll see a day where we get Premier League clubs that are 51% owned by the fans. I just don't see it. Thank you very much, Chazelle. There we go. And we've done that as well. Let me hit the chat. Learn to dance says the world doesn't revolve around you, Mark. I mean, learn to dance. I don't know what you're talking about. And I wish I'd never read your comment. And thankfully, I never read another one. Man, you'll never realise how much more enjoyable you make my lunch breaks, says Mr. Solo Liam. Hope you're going to tune in for the Super Bowl, by the way. What is something that Amorim could have gone wrong and play against him in the future, says Vian. I don't know what that means. They could keep the pitch and build around it. Still holds history, says Wayne. I liked White Hart Lane as well, says Orange Matt. Look, I don't for 1 minute think the Everton new stadium is ever going to be as good as Goodison Park. I just don't. It looks like every other new stadium. They're impressive. The Tottenham Stadium is impressive, but they just wrote. It's always everything's about money, isn't it? Bigger. Let's use it multi-purpose. You know, they're going to have a go-kart thing going on under the Spurs game. They do NFL games there. It's money, 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 and that's what it is, and that's what football's become. And I'm not knocking that, but I also am allowed to have an opinion that I think it will be I think we'll regret it in the long term. It's almost like the Glazers, isn't it? It's like when the Glazers came in. A lot of people said we will regret this in the long term, and some people went, oh, it'll be fine. And here we are. And I think knocking Old Trafford down and building something new, we will regret it in the long term, but a lot of people will get excited about having an LCD screen and all that. Do we have a better chance at the FA Cup or the Europa now, says Shahin? We've got to go hard for both. We have. Like, the Premier League to me is pre-season now. Competitive pre-season games to try and build performance for the Cups. That's what Spurs is next week. That's what Everton is. The Premier League is an opportunity to competitively improve our system. The Cup games, there is no margin for error. If somebody said to me, we're going to lose 6 more games this season, 100% all of them in the Premier League. Now, do you agree with me on that, actually? That's just riffing. If somebody said to me, we're going to lose 6 more games this season, considering if we lose 6 more Premier League games, it's our worst ever Premier League season. But I would take them all in the Premier League and win the FA Cup and the Europa League. It's rare to be in that situation where you don't value the Premier League, but I don't value the Premier League now. We fucked it. We fucked the Premier League weeks ago. So if we're going to lose 6 more games, every one of them in the Premier League, please, because all that matters now are the Cups. And in a way, it's all or nothing in the FA Cup or the Europa League, and the Premier League has become a glorified pre-season that's competitive. And if anybody's not on the page with that, please tell me what the point is in finishing in 8th or 9th in the Premier League and going out of both cups. If we don't get European football next year, you're going to lose Mainu and Garnacho and probably a lot worse. This is about a make or break summer, and that is dictated to by whether we're in Europe or not. If we get in the Champions League, we could have a very interesting summer of recruitment because it's suddenly £80 million of revenue, apparently. If we're not in Europe at all, it's nothing. It flatlines. So it's all about the cups now. And look, I wouldn't want to be in Spurs' position. There is no slippage at all. If you don't win that Europa League, you're not in Europe. And Spurs have got a stadium that I think they're still paying off. But more importantly, we talk about finances. Aston Villa will be in Europe. They'll be able to spend money. Newcastle will be in Europe. They'll be able to spend money. Chelsea, Liverpool, Man City, Arsenal. That's 6. That's 6 clubs, all going to spend money in the summer. Spurs not in Europe. Financially, it's difficult. You're going to get further behind everybody else. Man United, not in Europe. All those clubs are spending. They're already stronger than us anyway. That gap's getting bigger. That's the scary thing. It's all right going, we'll survive. We've just got to cut our cloth accordingly. But whilst you're surviving, everyone else is feasting. And it's the biggest hole in Mission 21 and the 5-year plan for 2028 or whatever. That's the presumption that everyone else is going to fall off and stop doing what they're doing. Liverpool will have a plan. Man City have got a plan. Chelsea got a plan. Arsenal got a plan. Villa have got a plan. Newcastle have got a plan. And all their plans are to be the best club in the world. So I think when we talk about projections of the future, Nobody ever talks about, but what about everybody else who's already ahead of us? Are they, as part of these projections, have they all agreed to down tools and stop trying? Of course they haven't. And they're in a stronger position because they've got better teams than us and they're going to have more money to spend than us. So very, very difficult. And like, I wouldn't want to be in Spurs' position, but we're only one game from being in that position, and that's getting knocked out the FA Cup. The Europa League is ours next season if we win the FA Cup. We'll be in the Europa League, which will replicate this season, and it will be some revenue. If we win the Europa League, we'll be in a better situation than this season because we'll be in the Champions League, which is more revenue. If we win neither, we're not in Europe. When was the last time we weren't in Europe at all? That is scary. Even the Conference League for Chelsea earns them money. To not be in Europe at all, that's really bad for a football club, really bad. BGino says, could we still spend in the summer without Europe? I think we could, but we would have to sell to buy. We would have to be selling people like Garnacho and Mainu to make up the loss. So not being in Europe doesn't mean the club is in bankrupt or anything like that. But the 50 million you get from the Europa League or the 80 million you get from Champions League, you'd have to make that up by selling Garnacho. And that 50 million you get from Garnacho, that doesn't necessarily mean you can spend that. That might be money that you need to spend to pay off other things. So, yeah, it creates problems. When was the last time United were not in Europe? Brod, well, there's a sentence there, isn't there? There's a statement there. When was the last time Man United were not in Europe? I mean, 89? 90? I mean, I can't think of a season that we didn't qualify for Europe at all. 97? 96? No, I don't know. Well, we didn't win the league when Blackburn won it, and we didn't win the FA Cup. But I don't know what the qualification for Europe was then. Moyes, 14-15. Bloody hell, yeah. Good point. Didn't win. Yeah, fucking hell. Yeah. What did we finish? 8th? Didn't win any trophies? Fucking hell. It was more recent then, yeah. I'll leave you with this. Somebody told me this today. Did you know? Did you know? Positive. We're finishing on a positive, although it might shock you. You might have heard it already. Did you know Man United have won 6 of their last 8 games? It's a head fuck, isn't it? It feels like we lose every week. Apparently, we've won 6 of our last 8. Now, I'm going to check this live because somebody told it me, and I'm just going to check this because I don't believe it, but I sort of do believe it. Leicester win, Crystal Palace loss, FCSB win. Sorry, Leicester win, Crystal Palace loss, FCSB win, Fulham win, Rangers win, Brighton loss. So that's 4 out of our last 6. Southampton win. Arsenal technically win on penalties. So 6 of the last 8, yeah. Van Gaal's first season we weren't in Europe, says Shahin. Thanks, Mark. Fair call. Good answer. Appreciated. Thank you very much, Alan. Hey, it's all about opinion. You're not the only one who wants a new stadium. As I said, I wouldn't be chaining myself to Old Trafford. I just don't want to see it happen. Right, I'm going to get off now. I am live again in about an hour and a half on That's Football for the Super Bowl. Even if you only want to watch half an hour of it before you go to bed, get involved. It's one of my favourite streams that aren't football related that we do every year, and hopefully it's going to be an absolute cracker. Into the early hours, I've got me cherry Dr Pepper to try. I've actually got coconut cream Dr Pepper, strawberries in cream Dr Pepper, and another one. So you can vote on what I'm going to do. I've got my American football top ready to go. I'm either wearing Broncos or LA Rams. I've got to kit out the rest of the studio. I've got a helmet and everything. So I'll push you over to the link so you know where it is, and I'll see you in a little bit for it. Thanks everyone for watching tonight. Great show tonight. Great conversation. That's what we're here for. And I'm back on the morning show with you tomorrow. Probably quite tired tomorrow. I might look like one of them American footballers tomorrow. You know when they put the black paint under there? I won't need to. I think I'll just be very tired. But I'll see you for the Super Bowl. Tune in for much as you can, and I'll see you later. Take care.